What's up, guys? I just reviewed the brand new remake for Witchboard, and a lot of you in the comments said, "What? I can't believe you haven't seen the original Witchboard." I've heard the name constantly throughout my life, but I just never bothered to watch it. Nobody ever told me, "Hey, you gotta watch Witchboard." So until now, until you guys told me. So yeah, we're gonna review it. Let's go. Witchboard stars Tawny Kitaen, Todd Allen, Stephen Nichols, and is directed by Kevin Tenney.
David, don't lie to me.
When someone uses a Ouija alone.
What's up, guys? Welcome to a classic catalog review. We're going to review 1986's Witchboard. Perfect timing since the remake just came out. If you didn't watch the remake or the remake review, I wasn't a fan. I thought it was just very bland. Pretty much commits all the crimes that a lot of bad modern horror remakes commit. I guess the bad Blumhouse movies. Yeah, it's just that type of movie. So I was kind of curious because sometimes when a movie is so bad, if it's a remake, it makes you wonder what's the original like. It came out in '86. That's a really, really good start. It stars Tawny Kitaen, that's also a really, really good start. And it does deal with like possession and, Ouija boards, which we're going to talk about the backstory of this movie a little bit too, okay? So looking forward to diving into this review. I did watch it yesterday, and I can say I liked it quite a bit. I didn't know what to expect going into it, and I will even say that I didn't even know Tawny Kitaen was in this movie. I'm a huge fan of hers. One of my all-time favorite 80s rock albums is Out of the Cellar. Tawny Kitaen happens to be on that album cover, and it's an awesome album cover. It's a great album from Rat. And, she's had an interesting career. She was dating O.J. Simpson, I believe, when she was shooting this movie. But it seems like in the 80s, she was one of those, I guess, it girls behind the scenes that gets a lot of coverage. Like, she famously dated David Coverdale from Whitesnake. That video helped this movie gain some momentum because when this came out, that video was already in heavy rotation on MTV. So yeah. So anyway, let's dive in and give you a quick plot synopsis for Witchboard. Tawny Kitaen plays Linda. She is dating this guy by the name of Jim. Jim has an old friendship with a guy named Brandon who used to date Linda. So there's sort of a love triangle there, but also Jim and Brandon were childhood friends. They'd known each other since they were children. And so that is definitely a theme of this movie, childhood friendship. When one of them has a breakup with Linda, then the other one kind of takes it personally, even though I don't think there was any kind of like cheating going on. I think just the one didn't work out, and then she went on to the other one. But that definitely causes a rift, and you can tell at the beginning of the movie because they're at this party, this gathering, and they're playing with this Witchboard or this Ouija board. And it seems like Jim is constantly annoyed with Brandon. Brandon is a lot more successful than Jim is. He dresses better. He's a good-looking guy. So, of course, Jim is going to be jealous of that. But Jim is currently dating Linda, and that definitely causes a kind of a rift in their relationship. So I guess to show off Brandon flexes his Ouija skills, he has been talking to this character by the name of David, who happens to be a child that passed away. And so his presence is in the Ouija board. Every Ouija board has one dominant spirit that inhabits it. And that happens to be David in this situation. But Brandon stresses that if you are using a Ouija board, you definitely want to use it with two people, because if one person's using it, then the spirit can have a tendency to take advantage of the host's weaknesses. And sometimes it's not the dominant spirit. It can be a spirit that has much more dangerous intentions. So throughout the movie, Linda becomes more and more addicted to using this Ouija board. This is really one of the few connections to the remake. The remake has a completely different story, different characters, but one aspect of the original that is in the remake is the addiction of the Ouija board. I don't even think it's called a Ouija board in the new movie. I think it's called a Witchboard. But yeah, really, that's the only thing, is that character is addicted to it. But I think the way they handled that addiction with the boyfriend not immediately getting rid of the board is handled correctly in this movie, because he does try to get rid of the board. He throws it in the garbage, but it finds its way back to her. That's how they should have done it in this movie. The other similarity is the iconic shower scene that's in the original with Tawny Kitaen. There is a shower scene in the new movie that's not nearly as awesome. And plus, it was already done in the original movie. So they're pretty much just kind of trying to copy it, but giving you a very sanitized version of it. And by the way, that shower scene with Tawny Kitaen was not a fun scene for her for obvious reasons. And the director who directed Night of the Demons stated that when you're, it depends on the actor that you're working with. Linnea Quigley is very comfortable with nudity on the set of any movie that she does, especially back then. So it wasn't an issue, and they could shoot it really quick and get it done with. But with Tawny Kitaen, she had all these different requirements and requests to make sure that she felt comfortable doing the scene, which is completely understandable. And she had done nudity, I guess, in the past, but this was, I guess, a more high-profile type movie. This is forever, so of course she wants it framed and lit in the right fashion. And so, yeah, it was a minimal crew setting, right? That you can only have a couple of people in there. And I guess the crew behind the scenes were kind of upset by that. Again, for obvious reasons. But just a sidestep, and this has nothing to do with the movie, but like if I were in a crew and there's an actress there that doesn't want people watching her naked, I wouldn't want to be in that room, if I'm being honest, unless I had to be in that room. But to me, I think I would feel a little bit weird for doing that. But maybe that's just me. Now, before we dive into what I really dug about this movie, I will say a little bit about the backstory. Originally, they wanted to call this movie Ouija, but they didn't get permission from the game developer. I can't remember, was it Milton Bradley? I can't remember who did the board game back then, but they didn't have permission to do it, and they had already shot like half the movie. And in the middle of the shoot, they ended up having to change out the board because they didn't want to get sued. And they still could have got sued because they already shot some footage with the board, but luckily they weren't sued. But they ended up going with the title Witchboard instead of Ouija to avoid getting sued. Which I think Witchboard is a more memorable title. I don't know. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. But I don't think Ouija's a bad title. They've used the title Ouija for recent movies. But I'm kind of glad that this was called Witchboard. I'm curious to check out the sequel, actually, because I heard the sequel's pretty good as well. So diving into what I really liked about this movie, there are a couple of shots that really remind me of Black Christmas. I loved the camera work in this movie. Sometimes it felt like they were using Italian horror type camera tricks, with the camera like frantically zooming in, especially during the last act with the possession scene. But there's a variety of different camera tricks and camera movements in this movie, depending on the context of the scene. And, that just stresses, a novice director from a really good director. Knowing when to use different camera setups and different angles, when to make the camera move, when to make the camera sit still, all that stuff. Very competently directed film. Also, the score in the beginning of the movie definitely has those Carpenter vibes to it. I almost was curious did Carpenter maybe do the score for this movie? He didn't, but that just goes to show the influence of Carpenter because so many composers were trying to mimic that Carpenter style back then, with the synth. Hell, even Brad Fiedel was inspired by Carpenter with the first Terminator. I like that this movie doesn't completely depend on the kills. It's more story-based, character-driven, but it does have some pretty cool and I guess shocking death scenes in it. One being the construction worker that's just sitting there. You got Jim talking to his buddy, and then all of a sudden the roof just comes down and caves on his friend. And you definitely see it. It's not one of those off-camera kill shots. But this isn't a movie that's just chock full of kills. I think the only other really memorable kill would be the psychic. There's a scene with the psychic in the movie. You can definitely tell that this is an 80s movie based on that character. Played by Kathleen Wilhoit. I've seen her in a couple other things. She definitely is recognizable, but she was definitely going for a certain look here. Had a Cyndi Lauper vibe, maybe. But she's cast out a window and she is impaled by a shard of glass that's sticking up. So this is definitely a horror movie. It has some violent kills. It definitely has that possession angle. Another similarity to the remake is the possession factor, because eventually they find out that it's not David that's actually talking through the Ouija board, or at least once the story evolves. It is in the beginning, But eventually another spirit takes over, especially when Linda gets a hold of the board. And then that spirit takes over her body eventually in the last act, which is a really cool scene. This is where you're definitely going to draw comparisons to The Exorcist with the manipulation of the voice, you know, the deeper voice. It sounds like her voice and another voice are kind of like doubled. As far as any cons for the movie, I mean, it's definitely dated, but I think it definitely has some competent acting in it. And to me, a movie being dated that's from the 80s isn't necessarily a bad thing, since I actually prefer that decade of horror anyway, and 70s. You know, to me that just adds to the charm, and I wish movies today had that vibe and had that feel that they had back then. And it's almost like maybe you can't replicate it. Maybe it's because the crop of actors that were doing work back then, they approached their craft in a different way than they do now. I don't know what it is. Also, we use more digital cameras these days, whereas back then it was all like 35 millimeter, 16 millimeter. And it just had so much charm to it and so much more depth to the frame. Yeah, I love that about this movie. So I'm gonna give this a purchase worthy for sure. Had a great time with it, and this is one of the cool things about what I do, is that I get recommendations from you guys, or even, you know, stressing me, hey, you need to watch this because I think you're gonna like this. And you guys were right, I really dug the original Witchboard. So if anything good came out of the remake, there it is, because the remake is kind of crap. So let me know what you guys think of Witchboard 1986 in the comments. I'm so looking forward to hearing them. Also, be sure to come over to Killer Flicks, where we talk horror all day and every day. On Fridays, do FIFA on Fridays. Follow my Drumdums on my socials, support me on Patreon, become a channel member, buy me a coffee. You know, guys, thank you so much for watching. Have a good day, and Drumdum out.